Professor Poldi, it's a great honor to have you here. We, as a gallery, have been working in research for the last 55 years, over 3 generations, and therefore we thought it is very important at this moment to share some of the thoughts that go into research and the various aspects of it. That's also partly in light of recent exhibitions, questions of attributions and all of that. We asked you one particular work to analyze, which is a Popova that's in the Ludwig collection. We have always been working in a very inclusive way. We look for the best expert on each field. If you know, in the 1970s there were 5 or 6 experts on Russian avant-garde that were famous, you would work with those. If that area has evolved and you have 10 experts today, we try to get the best one for each of those areas. But what is interesting in a recent example that we were facing and that we're still facing is that there were technical analyses made by a museum, and there was a catalog published, and in that catalog you have short references to those analyses, but they don't publish them completely. They only show experts that seem to support the thesis that one wants to support in that catalog.
Normally, scientists do scientific reports that try to be complete as far as possible, of course, which means they start writing the aim of the project, so with an introduction, and in the introductory part, materials and methods of the analysis should be clearly expressed. Also with the specific literature, this is a very important point. And you have to be very precise in telling, for example, okay, I did this sample here, or this measure here, this other there, and so we try to be complete. If I find something that is not coherent, I have to stress it and to say, okay, this is not coherent. Okay, this is the first level of presentation of a report. And then the second is the consequence, which is, okay, something is not coherent. Is that work completely not authentic? Or only that part of the work is not authentic, is not of the age, because it was restored, because it underwent some treatment and so on. And so that is another point. And another point is about some questionable things about, I found that pigment existed because it was synthesized at the very beginning of 20th century, for example. But we know that it was diffused on the market 10 or 20 years later. Could the artist have this material, this pigment molecule, I don't know, this compound, before the date of diffusion? That is known, but as far as it is known, of course, from the documents about the industries that produce that material. Some years ago, about a few years ago, about Rembrandt, someone proposed and applied a kind of analysis about brush strokes, and so trying to see if the movement of the brush is, we can say, highly statistical method, very interesting. It, of course, is an interpretation. We can't, we know that Rembrandt, with sure works, also in etching, for example, or in sure drawings, no, he used quite different, we can say, different hands, I mean, different styles. And what about this different style? Is it possible, for example, I always tell to my students this point, no? Of course, art history is made of coherence, but it's also full of not coherent points.
But your element about brushstroke is interesting, because when you were looking at the Popova in question, one of the only points that was criticized about the painting was the brushstrokes. And there was a bit of a conflicting information in the catalog itself about vivid brushstrokes, not vivid brushstrokes. That alone is an interesting topic, as you told me, but it is not conclusive.
In that case, as far as I know Popova, we can see that the brushstroke is similar to other Popova considered to be true, to be sure, and because we have many documents on that, and signatures, and on the verso, and so on, and so many data about them. Another point about that very painting, which is painterly architectonics, it was about the presence of a reddish ground, we can say a priming, a reddish brown priming, which was said not found in other works by Popova, which are usually white or off-white preparation or grounds or primings, depends. But two things. We know that Popova usually changed the colors of some forms, of some painted elements. In many paintings, if we look close to them, at a closer look, we find that there is something behind. Of course, maybe not a full primer of the painting. Maybe some analysis were not done on that on each painting.
Well, we don't know because they were not published. So
of course, and also. They were not done on all the paintings by Popova, of course. So another point is the possibility of having a comparison with a lot of works, scientific comparison with a lot of works. So not only at naked eye. Naked eye is of course, the first step, and is very important. And so this point about a colored ground is, I mean, how can we be sure that Popova didn't want to make an experiment?
Well, she was very experimental.
Of course. We always can admit that there was something strange. Of course, if the material was not...
from the time, yeah, that's different.
At the time, of course, that is different.
But that's not the case.
But that's not the case. As far as we can...
Which leads me to the original question that I asked you, and it's a bit of a tricky question, obviously. If one does the effort to go and reevaluate one's own collection, which is a daring thing to do and can be applauded, you would have to then, of course, do it in the most objective way possible. And you could not afford to leave out information that would be supportive positive as well as negative. I had a problem with this particular issue that when studying the catalog, one found that everything that was supporting the negative was highlighted and everything that was supporting the positive was left out. But if you have a situation like, let's stay with the Popova, where you have a monograph in which it's reproduced, you have 15 exhibitions in museums, you have technical analysis that was done in 1999 in this particular case, and it showed that the pigments and the canvas are authentic, and you then basically re-attribute something. Have you seen things like that in your practice? I mean, when you come to those kinds of issues, I'm sorry, it's a very subjective question again, but we've never encountered a situation like that. So I'm asking these questions out of curiosity and out of concern for the future.
I saw such cases. We can say perhaps a few. And what I found more than a few, really a lot of things, is we can say, an entanglement between the scientific data and the final opinions. I can say that, okay, a lot of analyses were done, but art historian doesn't speak about them, and so nothing comes out of interest from them, and so we can say they are different, like different flats in a building. No?
How would you like to see things happening in the future in an ideal way?
I like teams that work strictly together, and something like an hybridation of competences, mutual with not on. I mean, on each one on his own side, but with a great disposition in sharing knowledge and discussing also until we can say the final lines of an entry. Because when you do analysis, you say, okay, nothing is against. But as you can see, the painting is not coherent with the work of the artist. Okay, you can affirm this, but you have to demonstrate with images and with a great casuistic, and so the systematicity also on the art historian side is important. Of course, the entry of a catalog is only the entry of a catalog, but sometimes they are quite sad because you find that they are not very coherent, these entries inside them. You can give an opinion and write an opinion, and then perhaps you have to find a place where it to be discussed. Of course,
a symposium.
A symposium, a good symposium, a symposium where, or a round table, or a place where you give the others
the peer review process, as it's called.
The peer review process is very important. Of course, it is not. It doesn't give you the warranty about the perfection,
sure.
No? But it's very professional, it's very important. For example, if a catalog of an exhibition like the Ludwig one was done with a peer review process, the catalog would be very different.
I'm sure of that too. That's a very good note to end. Thank you very much for this conversation. I really appreciate it.